That's not the right slide. Guys from lunch. So thankfully, I'll be brief. We have a small slot, and this is going to be a little bit different, I think, to all the other presentations you've had so far. We don't have an API, we don't have an SDK, we don't have a way to get you guys mega scale with your B2C opportunities. But you've heard a lot about the sort of new age of the web, the new age of APIs, the new age of the semantic web, the new age of data. It's kind of exciting, isn't it, to see that we're not really looking at static documents anymore. We're looking at really rich, interconnected pieces of data that allow users to discover things, to navigate waters that they've never seen before. And data is kind of where we live as Thomson Reuters. My laptop. And what's really interesting is right next to data, there lives this big beast called complexity. So data and complexity live right next to each other, and we kind of often try to pretend that complexity doesn't exist. But in my experience, complexity is the single thing that stifles the other thing that we all really like, which is innovation. We really want to be out there. We want to be doing things that have never been done before. We want to be creating businesses. We want to be acquiring consumers. We want to be changing the world in ways people never expected. And how do we do that when we've got complexity on the side? You've missed out. So yes, we've got complexity on the side. And complexity is a real problem because it's the single thing that stifles innovation. There are companies, Netflix is a very, very good example of this, that dedicate about 20%. Maybe I'll do it from here. It'll be simple for everyone. Netflix is a great example of a company, for example, that spends about 20% of its engineering time managing complexity. And the reason for that is that they know that when complexity gets out of hand, they can really no longer innovate. But before I go into all of that, maybe you want to know a little bit about me and why I'm talking to you about this stuff. I used to be an engineer, actually. How many people know what this company does? You know, it didn't always used to be like this. People used to say, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Now at least a couple of people have used it. But I was technical architect at Shazam. And it's a music recognition company. It uses very high-end DSP to figure out in real time with great distortion what kind of music you're listening to from a catalog of about 10 to 15 million songs. Now I learned a lot about complexity over there. And that's kind of really interesting because right after that, I started my own company, AppSmart. And we were a mobile software innovator back in about 2007, 2008. And we were really looking at creating new products, new businesses, new things in this exciting new digital mobile world for companies that hadn't done it before. Companies like a couple of hedge fund managers, companies like Interactive Corp. And eventually, as of this year, Thomson Reuters says, we actually really like what you guys are doing. Why don't you come here and do some of that stuff for us? So here we are with Thomson Reuters, basically in a playpen of data that is really, really exciting. I understand a lot of you guys don't know who Thomson Reuters is as a brand, so just to give you a little bit of a background, we're a large multinational. We, I think, did 13 billion in revenues last year. A lot of people work for us. I think we've got about 60,000 employees globally. And it's kind of interesting to see what those people actually do. A lot of them are lawyers. Some of them are journalists. Others are news photographers. You might know a lot of the content that we produce. If you've ever opened a newspaper, you've probably seen something that one of our journalists has actually produced on the ground. They're in conflict zones, they're in stock markets, they're doing human interest stories, they're doing sports photography, they're doing loads of stuff that's really exciting. At the same time, we've got a bunch of accountants who are basically doing a lot of due diligence on the other side of the So you've got data, structured data, semi-structured data, unstructured data. All of this data flowing in real time. Some of it interconnected, some of it not interconnected. But what's really exciting is when you start to put those things together, you get much more than the individual items themselves. And that makes a lot of sense for mobile. Now, why mobile? Because it's a slightly redundant slide, so I apologize. I mean, you're all here, unless you accidentally got lost and ended up at the Mobile Developer Conference. You know mobile is important, and you guys know it much better than us Europeans do. You live and breathe mobile. You build these products, you use these products. One really interesting slide that I've loved over the years is this Flickr slide of the number of images being uploaded to the Flickr community. and how basically, at least in the US, pretty much everything just comes via a mobile phone. I'm not entirely sure what the market is like here, but back in Europe, you basically can't buy a point-and-click camera anymore. Everyone just uses their mobile phone. But there is a problem, and that is mobile is complex, especially when you start to do things that have never been done before. And if you look at the history of software and the history of platforms, you see that something happens, it's really disruptive, it's really exciting. Everyone tries to get on board. They create loads and loads of systems, middleware, stacks, solutions, platforms, services, etc., 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 that try and come together and create a rich ecosystem. Eventually, that rich ecosystem gets cut down. The losers lose. You're left with a small stack of de facto standards that everyone understands. And that small stack is really what people know and love and understand and can innovate on. But we're not there yet. We're at the start. And right now, we've got stacks and stacks of really complex things. And stacks are interesting. This is a great diagram, isn't it? You can imagine, if that's the core of whatever it is, you've got people building systems on top. What happens if there's like a little bit of perturbation at the bottom? Simple physics just works out the same way as it does in software as it does in real life. Things at the top start shaking around, and you're not quite sure, they don't work well anymore. People have to go in, people have to set something up and fix all the little things that are no longer compatible, fix all the little pieces of data that no longer work correctly. And what do you really do about this? Well, unfortunately, there isn't really a magic solution. The magic solution is you guys. The magic solution is people. People are the solution to navigating these waters. So the way when we deal with complexity, we deal with people who know the stacks, who understand why they exist, who can make real, meaningful choices. Because code is complexity. Every time you write a piece of code, you're making a choice. And that choice is either a good choice, a bad choice, or an adequate choice. But it is a choice that matters because it limits what you can do in the future. So how do we deal with complexity? Well, we deal with complexity with great people. Great people who understand the products, great people who understand the opportunities, and great people who work together. Our teams are pretty well integrated. We're structured. We have product owners, we have designers, we have developers, all working together in a way that's quite complementary. And it takes a while to build these sorts of teams. So it's important to understand that you need to find a common language, a common purpose. And along with that, you have deep integration. So you have deep integration across the product, you have deep integration across the vision, you have deep integration of technology and the design, which we believe in very, very strongly. So developers and designers working together in a world where nothing is sacred. It sounds kind of idealistic, but it is effectively what we try to build with an AppSmart, and it's effectively what Thomson Reuters found very, very useful. So as engineers, predominantly as I understand it, I think it's very important to sort of take a step back and look at the larger ecosystem and figure out how do we actually deal with this complexity beast. Just to give you a quick summary of maybe what we did with it. In our time at Thomson Reuters, we actually launched the Olympics, which was a great project because you can't move this launch to the Olympics no matter how hard you try. So you really have to get the product right from the get-go. And we built a system that allowed us to take all the great photography that we had from the guys on the ground. We had 300 photographers at the Olympics, taking photographs in real time. Usain Bolt crosses the 100-meter finish line. 2 minutes later, that photograph, that seminal photograph, is out to our subscribers and it's out to our consumers via our iPad applications. We've got guys in New York writing stories behind it, and we're just sort of integrating all of this in real time. And we had to build it in about 2 months. You can't do that sort of thing and deliver a commercial product unless you've really figured out how to tackle the complexity beast. So, as I am apparently out of time, why don't you see us down at the booth over there? We've got a couple of our products out there. You can have a look at the kind of things that we do and the kind of way we look at mobile and maybe talk to some of us. Thank you.